Once upon a time, there was a man who lived with a questioning mind and a curious heart. This man one day decided to climb a very difficult mountain. None he knew of had done so and returned. Many had tried, and of that number, not one had ever returned. All said it was impossible. All knew it to be the case, for no one had ever returned, and so no one for centuries now past had even bothered to try. And so, of course, no one the curious questioning man spoke to had themselves done so. But they knew this was a journey of utmost pointlessness and stupidity. To even consider embarking on this journey was surely a sign of the utmost insanity. But this man of curious heart and questioning mind asked, how could they know if they themselves had never tried? They had been told by others, who themselves had been told by others, who themselves had been told by others. Books had been written in discourse of the dangers of the mountain, of what lay in the depths and shadows of the jungle clothing its ascent. There was a story or two from a time so long now past of a few who claimed to have travelled and returned and had spoken of a view from the top of the mountain which changed a man's life forever, unimaginably for the better. The words these men used carried a passion, and so these books had become popular, and some had endured the course of thousands of years. Many believed the words of these men of old. Many worshipped them as gods among men. For these men, were they not special? These men who numbered only a very few, who dared to climb the mountain for themselves, the journey upon which so many had failed. These men were worshipped at the altar in the memory of their vision. Men of deception claimed, indeed, these men to be something beyond the reach of the average man. The view they had witnessed, the change of their lives, was not something to be claimed for all. And so the many cherished the words of those now long gone, and for such a long time no man had set foot on the mountain. Other stories had been long told by other men, unlike this man of questioning mind and curious heart. Men who never ventured to the mountain or considered to do so. They said, best not go to this unknown. Great dangers, perhaps, only lie there, they said. The man of questioning mind and curious heart decided to embark upon this journey. He gathered his friends and family and told them of his intent. "Stay with us, brother," came their reply, "for here it is warm, and pleasure is our abode, and good fortune is our only desire. Why move from a home of infinite comfort and promised wealth, offering protection and continued infinite pleasures, offering security? And besides this, we have the words of those who have been there. We need not therefore risk our lives as they risked theirs. We know, for their words have stood the test of time." Other men had not believed these words as easily as most. Fables, they considered, the telling of stories to provide meaning to a life beyond the repetitive superficial daily meaning offered. But the pleasure of this repetition, the immense wealth offered, seemed rather empty, unfulfilling even, to this man of questioning mind and curious heart. This life repeated over and over again, the same thing day after day, what once had seemed so full of promise when in youth, in later life had become a bore and a burden even to that which it promised fulfill, and life had become meaningless. The good fortune ever promised, just around the next corner, seemed so pointless, for always it was much talked of, ever talked of, and yet seen only, ever aimed for, and never seeming to arrive. And so the man of questioning mind and curious heart had grown greatly restless with his life. This day, this fateful day, he had gathered his friends and family together, listened to their reactive objections, and bid them farewell. He would travel to where all had feared to go. He would travel into the valley jungles and go into the greatly untread path of the dark mountain. The journey from which so few prior who had dared tread this path had ever returned, and those who had, perhaps, had never even existed, for their lives had been lived so many years before he was even born. Yet he recognized some wisdom in their words, and his curious heart beckoned him to begin this journey. His family and friends wept uncontrollably for him, wept with him. He wept at their sorrow and his own uncertainty of his chosen path. He wept at the parting of all he had come to hold so dearly. His heart felt like it would surely break. He kissed his own children goodbye. He held his wife the longest, for she had been his rock in adult life, as his siblings shook their heads, part in disbelief, part in astonishment, and later talked in whispers of his perceptible stupidity, how they wished they could have made their brother see sense. His friends all bid a warm and yet chilling farewell. A few tried for one last time to talk reason where there appeared to be none. The man of questioning mind and curious heart took his first few steps into the unknown. The most arduous of journeys lay before him. The mountain was so large, unfathomably large. The jungle so dense, unfathomably dense, and full of foreboding. Minute after minute, he began to cut at the growth before and underneath him, carving out the path he was to take, which grew out of his own laborious steps. Moment by moment, minute by minute, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, until all continuity of time lost any meaning, and the life he had so loved and recently left behind became nothing other than a distant memory. Years passed, resolve lessened as his beard grew longer and his strength began to falter, and the curious heart, which had been so full of hope, began to cry. He thought many times of his previous life, of what he had left behind, the comfort of it all, the certainty of it all. What had he done? He could have been there still, and this thought tormented his mind. The questioning mind turned into a mind of deep discontent, and a storm began to rage within. All had been sacrificed for nothing, all for nothing than this misery and pain. He had almost died so many times on this journey, of unknown length and uncountable days, and many were the times he would gladly have done so. Such had been the severity of hardships met. They were right all along, he repeatedly had said to himself. I should never have ventured beyond my front door. Yet he carried on. He carried on more out of necessity, for there was nothing else now to do. Behind him, the living jungle had claimed the path he had made for himself, and so he had no road to return, even though his heart so desired to do so. Many times he contemplated the previously unthinkable. Better to end this than to exist in such continuing misery. Once he had even tried, but the branch offering release from his inner and outer continuity of never-ending suffering had broken. He had awakened to a painful head and further injury which came to fester and took a long time to heal because of the intense heat and stifling conditions inherent to the jungle. Several days he had travelled far. Others, he came back many times to the place he had previously been, constantly wondering, how long do I have left? How far have I travelled? Where am I? What am I doing here? At times, he even came to ask the question, who am I? The life he had now left seemed more like a dream than anything as real as the life now only remembered. Was the woman he had loved an actuality? Was she still alive? Was he wondered? And still, he had no idea how tall was this mountain, how deep was this forest, what torment yet lay ahead. Would this path he had carved for himself so painfully slowly ever come to any destination? Was this a journey without end? Would he ever reach the summit? Perhaps, most likely, his family and friends now of distant memory or dream had been correct. Perhaps those first few steps taken as he had waved goodbye had been the beginning of his most pointless of decisions. Perhaps. Bitten by venomous snake and spider, he had hidden many times from wild animals of all description. He had curled up under trees at night as relentless biting insects had crawled over his face. He had shivered in monsoon-like rains, which never seemed to promise to run dry. Clothes upon his body were now as ragged and as withered as the skin they rested upon. Fevers came and went, muscles ached, nerves twitched, eyes weakened, legs gave way. He had shaken, trembled, and cried. So many times he had cried. He had cried as many times as the monsoons he had endured. He had come across local villagers on this journey, and all pointed him towards his destination, and all had lied. These were men of deception. These were men who held no value for a stranger's life, for one who had arrived out with of their daily life experiences, and these lies and deceptions had taken him further off course. He had cursed these men who had seemed friendly, yet only offered false counsel and more. He had eaten food and medicines prepared and offered by these others, met on his long travels, assured of its excellent nutritional value and healing potential for many wounds, both physical and mental, and all had only poisoned him more. Many times this man fell to his knees and wept uncontrollably. He had prayed to a God he hoped could help him, but in his heart of hearts had never found any first-hand evidence even existed. He had never seen this God. He had never heard this God. He had believed strongly in this God, and many times on this journey he had come to question why. His feet grew tired, and his mind grew weary, and his life energy dimmed. The vision between life and death began to blur. Was he truly alive? Was a life seemingly not worth living, so full of pain, anguish, labour and uncertainty, A life. Was it better truly to remain alive in this dense jungle, on this mountain of never-ending incline, growing steeper and steeper? In this place, he questioned when able to. He questioned. He deeply questioned. Why was I born to travel this path of such sorrow? Why did I even begin this journey? Why was I so foolish to leave behind my life of repetitive pleasures and promised wealth? He longed to return from where he came, but the path he had now long travelled to reach where he now stood was no longer possible to find. There was no way to return, and so he walked on. One day, a storm gathered above his head. He watched as dark clouds gathered, so dark, dense, turning the sky black and full of malice. There was nowhere to shelter. The floor of the forest became awash. Waters flowed between his naked legs, bruised and torn from travelling through dense, prickly bush. Tears fell down his cheeks to merge with the waters below. He fell to the forest floor and tasted mud. He would surely die, and this journey would at last be over. He had not accepted his fate. He had come to see the inevitability of where he was, when he was, and how he was. There could be nothing other than this. At this moment, he felt a strange, before unknown peace begin to stir within. This man of prior questioning mind and curious heart closed his eyes, and darkness fell. Birds sang in the trees. A warmth was felt on his face. The mud had dried. He awoke, coughing and spluttering. Am I dead? He wondered. He didn't care anymore. He sat up. A deep blue sky proudly presented overhead, the deepest of blues he had ever seen. White clouds floated above, the whitest of whites, forming shapes of design he had never previously witnessed. Birds sang songs which seemed to carry in the air, singing the majesty of the world around them. Pain still racked this body, and yet there was a different quality to the pain. He no longer sought to remove the pain or to make it better. He felt an inner peace and a deep gratitude for that one moment of time, that one moment which his years of struggle had led him to, that one moment which had always been, but which he had never before seen so full of seeking to reach the highest peak had he been. And he travelled no further than this, for without even reaching the top of the mountain, he realised he had reached the very summit. In time, he found a way back home. Some friends, some family had died, but he felt no sense of loss. All had grown older. Some were unrecognisable. He talked of the beauty to be found on the path to the mountain. Many listened. Many took to travel the same journey, though few returned. Time passed, and this man of questioning mind and curious heart died. And he died with the largest of smiles upon his face. Time marched on. More children came, grew old, and died. Books were written about this man of questioning mind and curious heart. Books about his life and his death, of his journey into the jungle and up the mountain, of his return and his words, as had been written before, many times before, many times written, many times lost in the corridors of time. Many people gathered and formed councils to decipher the value of the journey the man of questioning mind and curious heart had embarked upon. What had he seen on the journey which had so changed his life and death? Few sought out the arduous path itself, though many found comfort and solace in the words and the stories recorded. Centuries passed. Deceptive men seeking coin became translators of his words. This had been someone very special, they said. This journey had only been for one, or perhaps, at most, the very few. Many listened. Most believed, some did not. But among believers and non-believers alike, there lived one commonality. All knew, and so none valued the possession of a questioning mind or a curious heart. The jungle still stood there, noisy in its chattering, beckoning in its call. And the mountain stood tall in its timeless glory.